So Dallas, you got $30.92 up 25. That's for Volkswagen. You know, you are aware that the Volkswagen was designed by Hitler. Now, don't you think that that name should be out of business? And what are you doing investing in it? Oh, hello everyone. Jeff Williams here, North Star Oasis. Welcome. Sorry, I was having a conversation with my producer about Volkswagen. Are you aware that Adolf Hitler, sitting at a restaurant table in Munich in the summer of 1932, Adolf Hitler designed the prototype for what would become the immensely successful Beetle design for Volkswagen. And it was literally the car of the people, Volk being people and car, Wagen being car. And the name was given to the car in 1938. And Hitler had given his design to the head of Daimler and Benz and stressed its importance to take it with you and speak with people who understand more about it than I do, but don't forget it, I want to hear from you soon about the technical details. So the Volkswagen was designed by Adolf Hitler, yet Volkswagen Company and the over-the-counter markets as of today, $30.90, actually right now just switched, $30.92 per share. It's got a market capitalization of $77.12 billion US dollars. This is Adolf Hitler's company, and yet I don't see this massive outcry over that. Yet we can go ahead and have the. And while Dallas said he is short selling it, so maybe there is an outcry, we just don't hear about it. Anyhow, we are actually going to talk today about some of the current events that we have happening going across this country right now. And so we're going to start off with a Prager University video on why did the Democratic South become Republican? Because we have heard a lot in the news about how, lately, about how, well, the Republicans of the 1860s are the Democrats of today and vice versa. That's actually not entirely true. Let's check it out.
Once upon a time, every student of history, and that meant pretty much everyone with a high school education, knew this. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and the Republican Party was the party of emancipation and racial integration. Democrats were the Confederacy, and Republicans were the Union. Jim Crow Democrats were dominant in the South, and socially tolerant Republicans were dominant in the North. But then, in the 1960s and 70s, everything supposedly flipped. Suddenly, the Republicans became the racists, and the Democrats became the champions of civil rights. Fabricated by left-leaning academic elites and journalists, the story went like this. Republicans couldn't win a national election by appealing to the better nature of the country. They could only win by appealing to the worst. Attributed to Richard Nixon, the media's all-purpose bad guy, this came to be known as the Southern Strategy. It was very simple. Win elections by winning the South. And to win the South, appeal to racists. So the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, were to now be labeled the party of rednecks. But this story of the two parties switching identities is a myth. In fact, it's three myths wrapped into one false narrative. Let's take a brief look at each myth in turn. Myth number one, in order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact, Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928 when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith. In 1952, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower won the southern states of Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. And in 1956, he picked up Louisiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia too. And that was after he supported the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education that desegregated public schools, and after he sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock Central High School to enforce integration. Myth number two, Southern Democrats, angry with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, switched parties. Fact, of the 21 Democratic senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act, just one became a Republican. The other 20 continued to be elected as Democrats or were replaced by other Democrats. On average, those 20 seats didn't go Republican for another 2.5 decades. Myth number 3. Since the implementation of the Southern strategy, the Republicans have dominated the South. Fact, Richard Nixon, the man who is often credited with creating the Southern strategy, lost the Deep South in 1968. In contrast, Democrat Jimmy Carter nearly swept the region in 1976, 12 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in 1992, over 28 years later, Democrat Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The truth is, Republicans didn't hold a majority of Southern congressional seats until 1994, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act. As Kevin Williamson of National Review writes, if Southern rednecks ditched the Democrats because of a civil rights law passed in 1964, it is strange that they waited until the late 1980s and early 1990s to do so. They say things move slower in the South, but not that slow. So what really happened? Why does the South now vote overwhelmingly Republican? Because the South itself has changed. Its values have changed. The racism that once defined it doesn't anymore. Its values today are conservative ones, pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-small government. And here's the proof. Southern whites are far more likely to vote for a black conservative like Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina than a white liberal. In short, history has moved on. Like other regions of the country, the South votes values, not skin color. The myth of the Southern strategy is just the Democrats' excuse for losing the South, and yet another way to smear Republicans with the label racist. Don't buy it. I'm Carol Swain, Professor of Political Science and Law at Vanderbilt University for Prager University.
And that's absolutely right. Don't buy it. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about for a good portion of today. There has been, of course, a lot of talk going about how the parties have switched and how the Republicans are all racist and how the Confederacy stood for slavery, and we're going to get into some of that. This is not going to be a complete historical program today, because believe me, as a Civil War historian who's lived and breathed this for 30 years, I can come up with a whole hour off the top of my head and probably put you to sleep. Honestly, but I'm not going to do that today, or at least I'm not going to try to do that today. Of course, a couple of weeks ago we had the incident in Charlottesville, Virginia, so we're going to take a quick look at that. There was a cell phone video that had shown the deadly Virginia crash in Charlottesville, so let's just go right to that.
Protesters were going to to make their way to this neighborhood where a bunch of the alt-right people were. And anyway, then they were told to turn back, so they started to go up this alley, and then these cars just mowed them down. What happened? It's complete chaos. So there's a lot of blood.
We're close.
Yes, that was the chaotic scene at Charlottesville. I believe that was August 12th. Let me just look it up real quick. Charlottesville protest. That didn't work. Well, anyhow, it was earlier this month. I think it was the 12th of August. But that's what happened. Yes, there was a car that crashed through a group of protesters. There's still a lot about that we don't even know about, which is why I'm not going to spend a lot of time commenting or speculating on it. But I wanted to go now over to President Donald Trump's response to that.
We're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. This has been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play or be with their parents and have a good time. I just got off the phone with the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, and we agreed that the hate and the division must stop, and must stop right now. We have to come together as Americans with love for our nation and true affection, really, and I say this so strongly, true affection for each other. Federal authorities are also providing tremendous support to the governor. He thanked me for that. And we are here to provide whatever other assistance is needed. We are ready, willing, and able. Above all else, we must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first. We love our country. We love our God. We love our flag. We're proud of our country. We're proud of who we are. So we want to get the situation straightened out in Charlottesville, and we want to study it. And we want to see what we're doing wrong as a country where things like this can happen. My administration is restoring the sacred bonds of loyalty between this nation and its citizens. But our citizens must also restore the bonds of trust and loyalty between one another. We must love each other, respect each other, and cherish our history and our future together. So important. We have to respect each other.
Now, I've actually gotten flack myself personally because I actually supported that statement from President Trump. What was wrong with that? There should have been absolutely nothing when he says we condemn the hate on all sides, and that when he says that we need to restore the bonds with each other and we need to get over the hate. What's wrong with that statement? Yet there are those on the political left who feel that he did not go far enough because he did not bring up specifically the white supremacy, the KKK, when he's condemning it on all sides, including Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And that is part of the problem we have right now with the division in society, because you have this group, white supremacists, alt-right, KKK, very, very small minority, less than 200,000 members nationwide, versus Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Mainly Black Lives Matter, with Antifa, a smaller, even smaller minority, getting in the middle of that muckraking with violence. So you have two hate groups, Black Lives Matter and the KKK alt-right, who are protesting against each other, and then you get a militant hate group that came in and blew things up completely, and one person died. Now, it's sad and tragic that a young woman lost her life. I get that. But we still have to take into consideration, what was she doing there in the first place? You have three hate groups all together in the same geographical location. Do you think they're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya? I don't think so. And yet there are those who are still, to this day, want to make all of this about dividing us, and yet you have the president saying we need to come together and heal. What part of that message do they not get? Because it's actually a pretty good message. And it's one that I think a lot of people in this country have been wanting to say and wanting to live, and a lot of people have lived that. Now let's take a look at what Vice President Mike Pence had to say.
Charlottesville, Virginia is a beautiful community, a university town with a rich heritage. President Santos' son just graduated from the University of Virginia, and the president himself spoke on that campus. And what occurred there, as local and state officials have said, is in no way a reflection of the good and decent people of Charlottesville or of America. Of what happened there. Yesterday, President Trump clearly and unambiguously condemned the bigotry, violence, and hatred which took place on the streets of Charlottesville. Our hearts go out to the victims of violence that ensued, to the family of the young woman who lost her life, the families of the two police officers who fell in the line of duty, and all of those that are injured. We have no tolerance for hate and violence from white supremacists, neo-Nazis, or the KKK. These dangerous fringe groups have no place in American public life and in the American debate, and we condemn them in the strongest possible terms. The president also made clear that behavior by others of different militant perspectives are also unacceptable in our political debate and discourse. Our administration is bringing the full resources of the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute those responsible for the violence that ensued yesterday in Charlottesville, and we will hold them to account under the law. I will say I take issue with the fact that many in the national media spent more time criticizing the president's words than they did criticizing those who perpetrated the violence to begin with. We should be putting the attention where it belongs, and that is on these extremist groups that need to be pushed out of the public debate entirely and discredited for the hate groups and dangerous fringe groups that they are.
Vice President Pence is absolutely correct. Absolutely 100% correct. And we should be going after all of those fringe hate groups. And that's including the alt-right, KKK. I lump them together intentionally because they try to lump themselves together. That includes Black Lives Matter. That includes Antifa. All three of those groups are hate groups. That's what's missing from this narrative. That this is not about political ideology. It's all about hate from both sides. And we really need to get beyond that. But what happens? they take it a step further. Now I'm going to quote something from 2 years ago. I was quoted. And I'm going to quote something here because now we're going to move on to the Confederate monuments here. 2 years ago, there was a big debate over the taking down of a Confederate battle flag over the Confederate Memorial at the State House grounds in Columbia, South Carolina. And since I spent 4 years on the Minnesota Civil War Commemoration Task Force, I was asked about what my thoughts were on that. And this appeared on the online version of the Star Tribune on July 10th, 2015. I'm not going to read you the whole story, but this is right after Dylann Roof ended up killing people at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, and that's when the first thing about the whole Confederate flag came back up again. And I say came back up again because really it came up in 1999. That's really when this whole move to eradicate anything Confederate started. And the thing I said back at that time, if you take the Confederate battle flag off of the South Carolina State House, it's going to start leading into eradicating, taking down memorials and monuments, and then it's going to be a full-scale eradication of everything Confederate, but it's not going to stop there. I said that in 1999. And yet, in 2000, they had a peaceful compromise. Take it off the state capitol and then move it to a Confederate monument on the grounds of the state capitol. Okay, I don't live in South Carolina, so I didn't really feel that I had that much to, really that much credibility with it, especially in 99 and 2000, but that's what it was. And I wouldn't want South Carolina telling Minnesota what to do over the flag of the 28th Virginia, which the Minnesota Historical Society still holds in their collections. However, as a Civil War historian, I do feel that it was important to weigh in on this matter. And a couple things I said 2 years ago, that the current debate about the flag has been terribly misguided. I stand by that statement because I really do believe. Regarding Dylann Roof, I said it was not the Confederate flag or even Confederate ideology. The problem was with Dylann Roof. There is still a level of individual responsibility that people need to take in society. And there are those who are trying to eliminate personal responsibility and blame somebody for everybody's problems. I think we need to reverse that. We need to get back into saying, hey, you are the product of what you put in your head, just like you're the product of what you put in your body. And as a result, if you make bad decisions, you have to be held accountable to those bad decisions. What's wrong with that? I did say that the Confederate flag should be remembered in a military historical context and not in a political context, and that there has been an overreaction to ban all things Confederate, and, quote, once emotions run their course, perhaps the dialogue for the proper place for the Confederate battle flag in history can begin. And, of course, we haven't gotten to that point yet. And I'm not going to really bring that up at this moment, other than to say that that was my statement 2 years ago. And to this day, I still stand by my statement that there's a lot about the Confederacy and about the Confederate battle flag that people don't even have a clue about. Part of that's because we've been eradicating history, a proper telling of history out of the classrooms. We have. Museums, historical societies, history centers, they are all really going through some terrible budgetary times right now because it's hard to get people going through the doors paying the price of admission. There's kind of a recession in the historical museum world right now. That shows how far we have declined as a society in understanding our history. And I'm not even really going to make too many historical interpretations today, just because of the interest of time, other than to say that if people aren't paying attention to their history, they're going to get it wrong. Honestly, you're going to get the history wrong. Perhaps another time we'll actually spend more time discussing the Confederacy and the battle flag. I will say this real quick about the battle flag, which has always been the flag up in the controversy. The battle flag was created after the Battle of Manassas, First Manassas, in July 21st of 1861. And that was when General P.G.T. Beauregard's Confederate troops had a friendly fire incident. They were firing on themselves. And the reason being is that the national banners of the United States and the first national flag of the Confederacy looked too much alike. And that's the flag that both types of regiments were taking in the field, both sides. And so if they looked too close alike, and if you look behind me at the American flag, that's how it looked in battle. Not when it was out waving, but when it was like that, when it was on the flagpole, but there was no wind blowing, and the troops were just standing there. And so what happened? If you have two banners that look very, very similar, somebody is going to get it wrong. Whether it's to looking at it from a distance, or whether it's to smoke of battle, somebody's going to get it wrong. And Beauregard recognized that. And so he had requested the Confederate government to come up with another flag specifically for use in battle. And that was the one that we now identify with the Confederacy, which was brought out in November of 1861 in order to distinguish troops in battle. That's what it stood for. It didn't stand for the political statement. It stood specifically to identify troops in battle. And that's what people don't understand about this whole ordeal. So now we've got beyond the South Carolina Confederate battle flag and what happened in North Carolina, which is a little ways from Virginia, 60 miles, 100 miles, something like that. This is what happened in North Carolina shortly after the Charlottesville, Virginia incident. So I want to congratulate the protesters. I want to congratulate them. They were able to defeat an already vanquished foe. They killed an inanimate object. Congratulations. Now, yes, note the heavy sarcasm today, because 4 of them, and possibly more, but 4 that I know of, have been arrested because it is against the law to vandalize public property. And that's exactly what they did. But now there's a full-on onslaught to eradicate not just all things Confederate, but all things Civil War. There was a bronze bust monument to President Abraham Lincoln. Mind you, Abraham Lincoln himself never owned a slave. He had tried to peacefully reconcile the slavery issue when he was president. He was one who was for compensated emancipation and then eventually issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which is one of the things that led to the 13th Amendment and the freedom of those who were slaves in captivity. And yet, it was severely defaced by the same people who ideologically agree with taking down of Confederate monuments. I don't get that. Abraham Lincoln, he should be the hero. Hero to all African Americans, because he took a stand, and his stands helped free their people. Of course, you do have, in response to all of the Confederate statue, you have to have the one person who has to make their own personal statement. And I think this is just as stupid, seeing a Confederate reenactor with an AR-15 and a Confederate battle flag standing at Charlottesville. Shaking my head over this one.
Terrorists go home! 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 Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away!
Freaking water? Is that what you're doing? Dude, I guess you have a home to go to. You have people. There are people who are dead here and are injured in the hospital and you are fucking doing this, but you can just stand up and get
Terrorists go home!
Get out of
Terrorists
here!
go home! Tear it down! Tear it down! Tear it down! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home!
It's not patriotic now.
I wanted to honor my ancestors today, sir. They need to know that what they fought for wasn't slavery or oppression of people.
Where were they and where are they?
Thank you, sir.
Flag is back
When
there. Put it in there.
innocent people are being terrorized by him and his cronies.
Careful, I'm going to go ahead and clear out.
So,
You're doing what you asked.
can't walk out of the park by yourself, huh? So proud and brave.
You want another day like Saturday, don't you? You should be ashamed of yourself.
That blood is on your hands,
No, it's
not mine.
The only one who was right in that entire situation was the police sergeant. Yes. He was the only one. You already know that tensions are inflamed. Why did the guy with the AR-15 have to go there wearing Confederate reenactor gear and carrying the battle flag and having an AR-15 around his shoulder? He was there to make a statement. The protesters are there to agitate because they also want to make their statement. The only one who had the common sense and decency was the cop who got the kid out of the situation and was able to politely tell the woman off. He was the only one there who had decency. That's pretty sad. That's how far we've denigrated ourselves to as a society. And of course, Confederate symbols have spurred even yet a national division. Let's take a look.
Aftershocks from deadly violence at a white nationalist rally in Virginia. Under the cover of darkness, symbols of the Confederacy being moved or hidden from view. In Baltimore, a crane removed a monument to Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson from its pedestal. Working around Alabama state laws that prohibit the removal of Confederate memorials, Birmingham's mayor orders wooden panels to cover up a downtown monument. North Carolina's Durham sheriff is pushing for felony charges against protesters who already toppled a nearly century-old Confederate statue. And in Texas, the mayors of Dallas and Houston both hoping for more measured responses, launching reviews of Confederacy-related statues on public lands.
I think they are dangerous totems in our Dallas society because they divide us versus unite us.
History has its good, history has its bad. But I do think it's important for us to review our inventory and then to make the most appropriate decision.
The National Register of Historic Places does not keep a detailed list of all of the nation's Confederate memorials, but the Southern Poverty Law Center has identified over 1,500 Confederate place names and other symbols in public spaces. President Donald Trump continues to double down, blaming all sides for the recent violence.
Hello, everybody. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it.
At the epicenter of this latest wave of unrest, a packed memorial for 32-year-old Heather Heyer, who was killed during the Virginia protest.
If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention, and I want you to pay attention.
The memorial, a short walk away from the street where an Ohio man plowed into a crowd of peaceful protesters on Saturday, killing higher and injuring 19. Today on the streets of Charlottesville, a mix of emotions.
We will not go back to days of hatred and bigotry and division. We're not going back.
And fear is coupled with disbelief.
I think all the statues in Charlottesville or other statues, when you go and visit other places, it shows their history and what they've been through and what they've accomplished throughout the years. And I think that it's just stupid to have this big of a riot or this big of a problem over a piece of cement.
More than 150 years after the Civil War ended, the battles are continuing. Tracy Brown, Associated Press.
So people are all over the map on this, but I'll tell you this, I had a lot of people who, well, I guess before that, a Reuters Ipsos poll. Now keep in mind, back in November of last year, I had, even October, before the election, I had gone into the polls. And we did a deep dig into the polls, and I explained why a lot of the polls were off. However, the Democrats believed in the polls. They all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win because the Reuters Ipsos poll told them that Hillary was going to win. So if the Democrats are going to believe the Reuters Ipsos poll in November, then hopefully that they'll still believe it now. So the August 18 to 21 poll found that 54% of adults said Confederate monuments should remain in all public spaces, while 27% said that they should be removed from all public spaces, and another 19% said that they don't know. There. Science is settled. Confederate monuments stay because the polls say that they should. I'm just using liberal logic right back. I mean, we hear that over climate change debate. Oh, science is settled. There's a consensus. We hear that over the election. Oh, Hillary's going to win because the polls say so. So taking that same attitude, the August 18th to 21st poll says that 54% of adults said Confederate monuments should remain in all public spaces. That should be the end of discussion. The story is settled. Right. You think that they're going to believe something that they don't want to believe? Come on. Here's the thing. There have been a lot of people in this last week or two that have been trying to refight the Civil War, honestly. The Confederacy stands for slavery. Then we need to eradicate. Slavery's been dead for almost 152 years. Doesn't matter. Go back to our Prager University segment today. You know, the Democrats were the party of slavery for many, many, many decades and generations. So I put out a challenge. For those who want to refight the Civil War, and I'm going to tell you, I am not one of them. The first one was bloody enough. I don't want to see another Civil War. But if there are those in society who want to refight the Civil War, I think we should start with repealing 3 amendments to the United States Constitution. And here they are. Amendment 13. Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery. It was adopted on December 18, 1865. That was a result of the United States Civil War. But if they want to refight the Civil War, let's start by repealing it. We'll start over. 14th Amendment. Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. There are 5 sections here. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I just wanted to give you the first one. The 14th Amendment was also one of the Reconstruction Amendments. That was adopted July 9th, 1868. And the 15th Amendment. There's only two small sections. Section 1, the right of citizens in the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Section 2, the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. That was adopted March 30th, 1870. Now, the Democrats only had 23% support in favor of the 13th Amendment. I don't think 14th and 15th Amendment, I don't think that was passed through Congress with a single Democrat vote. When you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it took a Republican majority to carry that legislation. Former Minnesota Governor Al Quie actually has made statements, and he's told me personally that there was no way I was going to stand on the wrong side of history, that he knew a lot of African Americans, to use the politically correct term, that there was no way that his vote as a United States Senator at the time was going to go to hurt the people of his own district. And he voted in favor of the Civil Rights Act. He was later governor, but I think he was in the Senate then. The fact is, the support for the Civil Rights Bill in 1964 took a majority Republican support and was a minority Democrat support. So if the Democrats want to refight the Civil War, let's go right back to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. I would challenge them to put out repeal bills. And then let's refight that war. I don't think we should be doing that, but I also don't think we should be eradicating monuments to history. I think we need to take the time, as I said 2 years ago, to understand and learn our history from 152 years ago. That is what is missing from this entire debate today. People who don't have a clue on how we got here, spouting their mouths off like they're experts when they haven't even picked up one book or been to one battlefield to understand the historical concepts and the consequences and the conditions of how we got here. They have no clue, and yet they're the ones out there protesting. They don't even know what they're protesting over. So I challenge them to actually read the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Yeah. And if you haven't read the 13th, 14th, and 15th, I've read the 13th and 15th for you. The 14th is a little long. You'll have to look it up yourself. It's just that this is getting out of hand. And yet we have a president of the United States who's actually calling for us to heal, to unite. And that includes citizen to citizen. But yet we still allow one small minority section to muckrake. Don't buy into it. And no, I am not in favor of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment repeals. That is a challenge, but I am not in favor of it. Moving on. Keeping with a related topic, what have others had to say about this, especially coming out of the black community? Here's former NBA star and NBA legend, Charles Barkley.
Let's be honest, if I wasn't this type of guy, let's be honest, would you still be by my side? Let's be honest, if I didn't have a car to drive, then chase these dollar signs, would you want me?
I'm not going to waste my time worried about these Confederate statues. That's wasted energy. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep doing great things. I'm going to keep trying to make a difference, number one, in the black community because I'm black, but I'm also going to try to do good things in the world. I'm not going to waste my time screaming at a neo-Nazi who's going to hate me no matter what, and I'm not going to waste my time trying to worry about these statues they got all over the country.
So do you leave them up and ignore them? Or do you
I've always ignored them. Rick, I'm 54 years old. I've never thought about those statues a day in my life. I think if you ask most black people, to be honest, they ain't thought a day in their life about those stupid statues. What we black people need to do, we need to worry about getting our education. We need to stop killing each other. We need to try to find a way to have more economic opportunity and things like that. Don't waste. Those things are important and significant. You know, I'm wasting time and energy screaming at a neo-Nazi or, man, you got to take this statue down.
Bravo to Charles Barkley. That is exactly it. He doesn't care. You know, honestly, how many people actually look at statues anyway? Does anybody know which statues we have at the Minnesota State Capitol? Good question. Do you even know who, Newt Nelson? Who was Newt Nelson? Did you know that there's a statue to Newt Nelson right by the stairs of the Capitol building? How about Floyd B. Olson? Have you ever heard of him? There's a statue of him on the grounds too. Does anybody know who these people are? I guarantee you that the people who understand and know who these people are in the South is very slim. Like I say, people are getting all bent out of shape over nothing. NAACP leader Esther M. Lee had a very interesting comment on the destruction of the monuments. Let's hear what she has to say from Pennsylvania.
I think it's all senseless.
Esther Lee is the president of Bethlehem's NAACP and says the images that she's seen over the last few days have been tough to watch.
You know, we still have this factor about black and white. What does that have to do with it? I bleed red blood.
We're not going to tolerate what happened in Virginia in the Lehigh Valley. It's not going to happen here. We won't let it. We have good people here.
But Lee says violence is still violence. She doesn't agree with the vandalism of Confederate monuments in Baltimore or condone the actions of those who tore down this statue in North Carolina.
Yeah, that's history. That was in that point in time. You can't eliminate what history is. A young woman died. 2 officers were murdered in a plane crash, and all for what? You know, because somebody in their mindset decided we don't need to look at that anymore. It shouldn't be.
Kudos to Esther Lee for speaking out on behalf of the NAACP. When I was a kid, do you know how I learned Civil War history? Before I even picked up a book. Let me show you my purview. What did I see for Civil War history, as many kids who grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s did? Let's take a look.
Well, shut my mouth and call me compound if it ain't the little old South. Eyes come in, but my head is bending low.
Get back there, you dang Yankee! Great horny toads, I'm up north! Gotta burn my boots, they touched Yankee soil. Lay down your arms and step forward, Yankee!
What's the hassle, Schmassel?
My orders from General Lee is to hold the Macy-Dixie line, and no Yankees are crossing it.
General Lee? Why, the war between the states ended almost 90 years ago.
I'm no clock watcher. And until I hears from General Lee official, I'm a blasting any Yankee that sets foot on Southern soil. So scram, Yankee! Well, it's one of our boys.
The sun shines bright in my old Kentucky home.
Hey there, boy. How about giving out with something peppy on that there skin box, huh?
Yeah. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony.
Yankee Doodle?
Carrot in his hat and called it the carrot.
You traitor!
Don't beat me, Massa. Please don't beat me, Massa. Don't beat that tired old body. No, no.
What's this I hear about you whipping slaves? But, never never mind the buts. Here's my card. Look me up at my Gettysburg address. Oh, charge! Okay, you fur-bearing carpetbagger. I'm giving you 1 second to come out or I'll blow you out. Time's up. I hate that rabbit.
And that was, of course, Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes. That was how most kids actually understood that there was a war between the states. We didn't understand anything more than the fact that Bugs Bunny was for the North and that Yosemite Sam was for the South. We had no idea what the war was fought over. We really didn't care. It was just fun to be able to laugh at Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam. It was great to be able to see a parody that was created in 1953. Kind of wish we get back to that. That's what people should be knowing about the Civil War. Yes, we have to understand the longer-term consequences. We have to understand all of that. But at the same time, we still can't be afraid to laugh. But we did use cartoons as a lot of propaganda. You know, Fantasia from Disney. I mean, and Bugs Bunny with, the Barber of Seville. That's where we learned classical music. That's where we learned opera. But we had fun in the process. But we've gotten away from that as a society, and that's something we really need to get back to. We need to go back to enjoying life again instead of all this cantankerousness. Speaking of cantankerousness and symbols, I want to show you real quick. 1928. This is the symbol of the Ku Klux Klan. Do you notice what you see there? How many Confederate battle flags have you been able to count? Hope you say 0 because that is exactly the correct answer. The symbol of the KKK back in the 1920s was the American flag. And mind you that there were more people in slavery for 74 years under the banner of the United States of America than the entire 4 years of the Confederate States of America. So if we're going to go back to eradicating symbols, then let's eradicate starting with the American flag. Now, I know there's probably some who are actually going to take that comment seriously. But that still doesn't solve the problem. That still doesn't end the hate. If you can go ahead and eliminate the Confederate symbols, but as we led the program off, we want to talk about Nazis, which is the other part of this debate. The Volkswagen was designed by Adolf Hitler. But yet, the Volkswagen hasn't changed their name. I think the Democratic Party really needs to just change their name. Get rid of that racist symbol. The Democratic Party's name stands for slavery, and I think we need to abolish it. That's the answer to the entire problem. Sounds good, doesn't it? I think so. I don't know why any black person, if they understood what the Democratic Party stood for, I have absolutely no idea why they would even vote Democrat for a party that put their ancestors in in slavery, that gave their ancestors the headaches of the Jim Crow laws, the party that stood for their ancestors lynching people. That was your Democratic Party. The Democratic Party needs to rebrand themselves by changing their name. That's another challenge. If the Democratic Party takes up my challenge, they will change their name and they will repeal the Civil War amendments and will refight the Civil War all over again. Will they be happy with that? Now, of course, I brought up Adolf Hitler, brought up Volkswagen, but I'm going to show you for a little bit here. We're not going to get through the entire section here because for the time we've got left. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to show you the ending of this, but I want to show you a video that Disney put out in 1943. And it's actually a Donald Duck video. It's called Der Führer's Face. Let's take a look.
In time of war, it's typical, sometimes even useful, to demonize your enemy. We still see this today whenever a dictator or despot comes to power anywhere in the world. Caricatures and jokes, not always in the best of taste, rise to the forefront because it's our way of relieving aggression. So it was in World War II. Some people feared Adolf Hitler. Others mocked him. The Disney staff came up with the idea for a cartoon to be titled Donald Duck in Nazi Land, giving the all-American duck a nightmare that he was living in a country run by Nazis. The title changed when a song written for the cartoon by Oliver Wallace became a runaway hit and a now classic recording by Spike Jones. It then became essential to change the name of the cartoon to De Fuhrer's Face. It's easy to see why the film was so popular. It's very, very funny, reducing the serious tenets of Hitler's Nazism to slapstick absurdities. And it gave audiences a chance to think, as Donald does, about the freedoms they might have taken for granted.
Am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America?
De Fuhrer's Face, directed by Jack Kinney, won the Academy Award as Best Animated Short Subject of 1943.
Says, wie ist der Master Race? Wie Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace. So wie Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face. When Herr Goebbels says, we own the world in space. Wie Heil, Heil, right in Herr Goebbels' face. Then Hulk Göring says, they'll never bomb this place. Wie Heil, Heil, right in Herr Göring's face. Is he not the Superman?
Aryan Führer Superman? Ja, wie ist der Superman?
Super duper Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Ja, this Nazi land is good. We would leave it if we could. We bring the world new order.
Heil Hitler's world in order.
Everyone a foreign race will love the Führer's face when we bring to the world disorder. Then the Führer says, he is the master race. The Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace. So the Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face. So the Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face.
So I want to give you the beginning of that. We're not going to run really a whole lot of time on Nazism here, other than to say that the people in Charlottesville, Virginia are not Nazis. And one thing that the Democrat Socialists, which is actually the name of the Nazi Party, they actually require a strong leader, and you don't have a strong leader in all of American Nazism. You just don't. And no, Donald Trump is not a leader of the Nazis as much as the Democratic Party wants you to think that. I wanted to show you this because this is one of the things that happened during the Second World War, where companies like Disney and Warner Brothers, they actually used cartoons to bring out, some people may say propaganda, driving on fears, but that's how people really got a chance to actually have any type of emotional attachment one way or the other with what was going on in Nazi Germany. But that's another time, another episode, another show down the road. So for Dallas Pearson, producer, I'm your host, Jeff Williams, reminding you, you have 122 shopping days left until Christmas. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.